Welcome, everyone. Acceleres presents. Today we're going to talk about System Center Orchestrator, top runbooks, and integration packs. What we asked James to cover was, what are some of the most requested, most useful runbook and integration packs available? Let's find out what you're finding as useful. What challenges and solutions are you providing using runbooks to help clients organize what they automate? So our presenter today is James Taylor. Anything else you want to say, James, with regard to what you want to cover?
No, it's really, as far as the runbooks go, it's more about the top runbook scenarios, and we'll sort of get into the details of why that is. And that's about it.
Okay. Well, why don't you let us know what you're going to go ahead and cover? Do you want to cover it out of the, you would like me to advance the slides, or can you do that from where you're at?
I don't think I can advance, can I?
I'll do it for you.
Yep, I can. Nope, I got it.
Okay.
So, really just talk about today to hope you guys find this helpful. And please, if I realize that there's a Q&A session at the end, but if folks have questions during the presentation, please feel free to type something in the IM window, and I'll try to get to it as I see it. So, what we really wanted to talk about today was what we have found to be the most useful Microsoft and third-party integration packs, kind of the must-haves, in order to create the more complex IT business scenarios, the most common runbook scenarios, and hopefully some additional resources for you guys, and then there's going to be a Q&A at the end. So let's get right into it. Microsoft Integration Packs, what's new in 2012 SP1, because that is the latest Orchestrator service pack, and there's a couple of new integration packs out there that I wanted the folks to be aware of. So for the Exchange integration packs, they've kind of split between administrator and users, and they put a lot of work on the Exchange administrator integration pack to not only be able to do on-premise management, but also to do remote mailbox management where you're in a sort of a hybrid scenario, and a lot of companies are starting to get in this hybrid scenario where part of their infrastructure is on-premise and part of it is in some sort of cloud scenario like O365. And so this is meant to sort of traverse. This integration pack will help you traverse that scenario where, or some others cloud offering where you've got sort of this hybrid scenario that you need to be able to traverse in a single workflow. And then there's the Exchange user integration pack. What this was intended to do was to create a sort of an integration pack that would help with client-based activities like sending mail, receiving mail, but that deleting mail items, forwarding items, finding appointments, updating items, that sort of thing. Is more of a client-based scenario when you wanted to essentially act on behalf of the client during a particular workflow. One of the more interesting ones that they've done is they've introduced a representative state transfer or REST services integration pack, and it really only has one activity. It's invoke web service, or invoke REST service, I should say. But there's a lot of required properties. Obviously, as you can imagine, in order to do this, you need to, have the HTTP version and the method and the URL, or whatever the encoded URL is, timeouts, authentication types, certificates, that sort of thing. But it's a really cool integration pack that enables you to invoke web services fairly easily. And that it's kind of interesting. You can create sort of this, I don't know what you would want to call it, but sort of an endless loop kind of scenario, because there's a REST service in Orchestrator 2012, and I haven't played with it, but I would imagine that you'd be able to invoke that from the runbook. So it's kind of sort of an interesting scenario there. And then lastly, there's a lot of the work that went into both the 2012 and the SP1 release was really around integration with Azure. And in this SP1, they've released an Azure integration pack for Orchestrator that enables you to do a lot of stuff from Orchestrator. I mean, you can deploy applications, you can add VMs, you can add data. I mean, there's a bunch of VM controls. There's change deployments. You can change your deployment configuration. There's checking your cloud services. You can copy blobs. You can delete containers. I mean, there's anything that you can imagine that you can do the Windows Azure API you can do through this integration pack as an activity. So they put a ton of work into this. I don't know how relevant that is for folks. I mean, I know that there hasn't been a lot of migration to Windows Azure, but I think that they're hoping that this will. I think they're hoping that this will start driving some of that traffic. I don't know. So they've also updated some integration packs as well. The Active Directory integration pack, I looked and I couldn't see any difference in activities that were there. But there is some, I believe, some bug fixes. So the activities, I mean, when you install the SP1 integration pack for AD, you're going to see the same set of activities. I don't see any difference there. But there probably is some bug fixes in there. But although I can't confirm that because I can't find any documentation about it. So there's also they also invested in making sure that the integration packs for Operations Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, those kind of things would rev with the SP, because there were some changes in SP on the Operations Manager side. There was changes from SP on the Virtual Machine Manager side in terms of how it was working. So they had to upgrade. They had to update the. I don't think there's a big difference in activities. They had to update the integration pack so in order to be compatible with those changes. Third-party integration packs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but they did rev some third-party integration packs: HP, ILO, and OA integration. This is the integrated lights out boards. So kind of bare metal management. HP Operations Manager, it's compete with SC Operations Manager, and Service Manager again compete with Microsoft Service Manager, and then there's a VMware vSphere integration pack. So these got revved by I'm pretty sure they got revved by the vendor, not by Microsoft, but they're included in Microsoft's offering. Community integration packs. These are sort of what I consider the must-haves, and for those who don't know where these are located, they're on orchestrator.codeplex.com. They've been written by the community, but they're absolutely kind of must-haves. And I'm assuming at some point that Microsoft will start certifying these and actually bring them into the fold. So there's one for data manipulation, and this is really an important one to have. It allows you to aggregate data and compare fields and match patterns and replace text and that sort of thing and transform data within a workflow. So for folks who've had to do this, I mean, rather than having to write some sort of script and then do it that way, that there's an integration pack for this, which is really helpful to have. Same thing with text manipulation. It allows you to
That's string functions, right?
Yeah, it's basically string functions. Yep. But it allows you to now a key to this data manipulation, text manipulation stuff. It does not allow you to change published data. The data bus is the data bus, and these activities won't allow you to change stuff that's in the data bus itself, unless it's a field or a variable that a global variable or counter that you've set up. But it does allow you to do text manipulation, like I said, data manipulation on all the pieces of data, and certainly on files and that sort of thing. Then there's an IP for SQL that kind of extends the native SQL connections by adding a test, a couple activities, testing the SQL connection, deploying SQL scripts, and one of the more interesting one is generating XML from SQL. So this is sort of for those who there's like already a SQL as part of the standard packs, but this is just an extension to that. And same thing with the Windows chats. It's an extension to the normal, the standard functionality that adds file system maintenance and multi-server WMI querying activities. And the last one is really sort of, I don't know if I probably should have put that first, which is standard logging. It adds a ton of logging capability for Orchestrator so that you understand what's happening with your workflows. I think that's almost critical. This is like the most critical one to have to sort of add on. If you're writing anything that spans more than 10 sort of activities within a workflow kind of thing. I mean, once you start linking workflows together and you start having parents and children and stuff like that, the standard logging is I think it's critical that you put logging inside of your workflows. And then there's some common utilities out there. that you can sort of add-ons. The Orchestrator Remote Tools provides about 3 different components that are kind of interesting. There's a UI generator that lets administrators browse through all the runbooks. There's a remote runbook launcher, and there's a remote runbook launcher CLI. That's the command line version of it. So that's sort of the remote tools. The SEO Job Runner is essentially the same thing, sort of a subset of the remote tools. SEO Job Runner is just a command line utility for launching jobs. The Ops Manager Extensibility Kit is kind of interesting. It's got a bunch of example type samples of how to do Ops Manager programming, and so I think it's interesting for folks who want to extend Ops Manager, or sort of, I don't know, extend what's in the Ops Manager integration kit. There's a bunch of samples about how to create additional activities, and it's got some C code in there and stuff like that. So it's kind of an interesting utility that allows you to sort of extend what Orchestrator can do against Ops Manager.
What's its focus, James? Is it for remediation of things that pop up in OpsMan?
No, it really is. Think of it like an SDK for extending the existing integration pack. That's really what it's about.
Okay.
Yeah. Then there's Category Switcher Tool. I don't know how interesting it is for folks, so I'm just not going to talk about it. I don't even want to know why I put it in there. So let's move on to common runbook scenarios. And the reason I call it common runbook scenarios rather than top runbooks is because it's really difficult to say here's a top runbook. It's really more about scenarios, because if you take a top runbook, for instance, workflow integration with what I call heterogeneous IT technologies, which is one of the most common scenarios, it's really hard to pin down a runbook that covers that area, because all IT, and this is why it's a top scenario, IT environments, as everybody knows, sort of evolved over time and need, and the technologies that span those environments are typically both across, it spans operating systems, and it spans internal IT applications, and it spans, diverse, middleware, and there's just, every IT environment's a little different, and so to basically say, here's a runbook that will help you do workflow integration doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is a common scenario. It's probably the most common scenario. Where you have, a business example is, you've got, some monitoring system, be it, System Center or HP or whatever, and then you've got some sort of incident management system, and again, be it IBM or HP or Microsoft or whatever, and you've got some sort of business CMDB, be it homegrown or whatever, and you have a need for workflows that traverse those business systems. That's really common. Or there's workflows in order to do procurement that traverse business systems, or there's workflows in order to do change management that traverses these business systems. This is kind of what Orchestrator's biggest strength is the ability to integrate an IT process that traverses, and to manage that process and automate it, that traverses all of these various technologies.
James, we got a question here. It's Patrick's asking if there's a Visio template for designing a workflow.
Not to my knowledge.
There's that Word documenter add-in. I remember that, where you can.
Yeah. I don't know that there's a Visio plugin, but you could use the same control flow that's within Visio that you use for other programming languages for this. I would say that I kind of tongue-in-cheek call Orchestrator 5th generation programming language, because that's kind of what it is. It's sort of this drag-and-drop programming language. And so if you use Visio today to do control flows within your current applications, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do it with for Orchestrator, but there's not specifically that I know of an Orchestrator template for Visio. The second kind of common scenario is what I call intelligent patch management, and this is really truly about orchestration. It doesn't typically, it may traverse a couple technologies, but this is more really about orchestration. It's about saying, I need to be able to lay down patches and reboot machines in my environment in a very, very specific way. And while, a product like System Center Configuration Manager has some amount of task sequencing, I don't know that it's sufficient to do I don't know that it meets the bar of the kind of orchestration that people have to do within their environment and to make the kind of decisions that need to be made in order to do that orchestration. And so it's a really common scenario for Orchestrator to be used for this purpose. Now, as you can well imagine, this turns into a very, very complex kind of activity very quickly, which is, again, why there's no oh, so I just popped it in there. So there's one. David, did you do that?
Yeah, I'm popping it in.
Okay. So when did that get released? Do you know?
It's an old thing. It's an old Opalis thing.
Is it?
I would look at it. It's more to document. It's actually very useful. We use it to generate just Word-based documentation because you pull them up in the console and you can't see what's behind it, and it's just useful to when you have other scenarios where you have Word documentation to say this is what this runbook does. You can annotate it, etc. Yeah.
So that's for sort of to generate what an already designed.
Yeah, it's not
the reverse of that, which is
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the third common runbook scenario that I've seen out there is provisioning, whether it be bare metal provisioning of machines, whether it be provisioning VMs from hosts or doing application deployment. I've seen I've seen again a lot of need for orchestration in terms of provisioning. Oh, and also traversing a lot of different technologies. But the most common aspect of this is businesses want to get better at it. They want less mistakes, and they want it to go faster. And so that's a common reason why you turn to Orchestrator, because obviously, once you've done the workflow and it works, it's repeatable. It does the same thing over and over and over again. And it also obviously has the ability to very quickly speed this up and take a lot of people out of the equation and make this a lot more automated. The next one is incident management automation, where people want to do, kind of sort of those automated troubleshooting kind of steps or automated self-healing kind of steps, and they want to plug in, with their incident management system, and they want to be able to, plug in with their documentation system and be able to just basically automate what excuse me, what a typical tier 1 person would do in order to resolve, an incident that comes across.
If I could ask Nick and Pete, I just wanted to ask, in addition to just incident management, automated remediation, etc., what are some of the common runbook scenarios in support of System Center Service Manager? Things that you need to automate that aren't necessarily built into the product, and Orchestrator's typically helpful with. What are the client-demanded runbooks?
We've done some things with like auto closure of incidents. There are a number of free management packs out there that will handle that for you, but you can automate closure of work items after they've been resolved or completed for a period of time in Orchestrator. You can do more advanced email notification from Orchestrator, just using the SMTP activities that are standard inside of Orchestrator. And we'll do those sometimes because there are some limitations to the kinds of notifications we can do in Service Manager, especially around SLOs. So it's easy to send emails when SLOs breach, but it's a little bit more difficult to specify which SLOs we want to cause an email, which we don't, and which ones we don't. So Orchestrator is helpful there.
Hey, Nick, can you talk about how software distribution has changed?
Yeah, that's a good point. Another, in Service Manager 2010, there was workflow built in with the Service Manager portal,
Right.
and an integration with Configuration Manager that would allow you to do automated software distribution through the Service Manager portal. That functionality is still possible, but you do need to use Orchestrator now. So you can set up request offerings in the Service Manager 2012 portal to request software. Orchestrator is going to sit as the integration piece then between the Service Manager and Configuration Manager, where before Service Manager 2010 had built-in workflows that would run. Those workflows still exist inside of Service Manager. They sort of sit there dormant, and you can still turn them on and use them if you'd like, but it's probably easier just to use Orchestrator to do that. And you get a little bit more flexibility with Orchestrator, obviously, because you've got full control over the behavior of that workflow, where in 2010 it was static, you couldn't change it. So, and then of course just regular integration, for request fulfillment, creating new Active Directory users, requesting software is an example of that. So having Orchestrator automate, probably not the full thing, but automate a piece of some request offerings to help automate the fulfillment of those.
What about, I guess this is what James was talking about, incident management automation. What about automated remediation? I'm constantly surprised that I don't see as much activity around that as I expected with the products. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, we don't either. I think the interest is, I think part of it is probably just a maturity thing. Orchestrator is the kind of application that folks need to grow into slowly and build over time. So, and there's just lower hanging fruit in terms of new user requests and the software distribution. So that tends to be the focus. But I agree. I think that there are some opportunities for automated remediation there. But we haven't gotten an opportunity to get into some of those things.
Yeah, it's been minor on my part. Okay. Hey, thanks. Go ahead, James. Sorry.
No worries. So finally, the sort of the last piece of this, from a common Runbook scenario perspective, is self-service scenarios where IT is trying to get out of the business of manually doing things that they commonly get requested, and that's like capacity requests, IT, user account management, and other type of IT service requests. So that they're trying to enable more self-service scenarios, and that's the sort of the last common application or runbook scenario that we see. So because these runbooks tend to be complex, you don't see a lot of here's a runbook that'll solve this problem for you out there, because they tend to, like I said, they tend to be complex. They tend to be diverse, very divergent from a technology perspective, and a lot. One IT process will never match the same IT process in another shop. It just doesn't happen. And so, but there are some resources that'll help you. Some resources and some kickstarts for folks to get sort of started on this. One of the best is there's a System Center 2012 Solution Runbook example kit that you can get from Codeplex, and it's got a bunch of samples in there with subroutines that will enable you to at least do some of the subroutines that you're commonly going to do within a runbook. It'll kickstart you there. So it's a really good, and it also shows you some of the more design aspects of it. For instance, linking runbooks and how to use a particular activity properly, and that. So it's a really good source of information when you're sort of as Nick says, growing into Orchestrator. It's a really good place to start. Although there's also TechNet blogs out there, but I think most of the value that's going to come from, for folks trying to learn Orchestrator is really going to come through CBT training, and on-site training, and professional services. That's where you're going to learn or get the most value. And I mean, it is a sort of an open-ended development environment, and folks kind of again, you have to kind of grow into it. You can do everything or nothing with it, and so I think it's kind of key from a how to best utilize Orchestrator perspective is really training and professional services, which obviously we offer. So, and then there's obviously the online resources, the Orchestrator Home. There's TechNet location. There's blogs, the community, which I mentioned earlier, which is the orchestrator.codeplex.com, and there's community forums on social.technet.com.